evening, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us. I am Jennifer Dixon, and I'm here with EGLE's Air Quality Division. We're here to talk to you tonight about a proposed air permit for DTE Marshall LLC, or we'll probably just call the company DTE for this evening, and Ford Motor Company Blue Oval Battery Plant, which we'll refer to as Ford. So before we get going through all of the presentation and things like that this evening, there's a few things that I just want to go over, housekeeping type of things that we need to talk about so that folks know what the plan is. So your lines will be muted this evening. We are recording the meeting, so if you have to jump off early or if you know folks who wanted to be here tonight who couldn't be here, that recording will be available in the next couple of days. We'll share that out via email to everyone who attended tonight and anyone that was on the interested parties list. So they will get a copy of or a link to that recording. A couple other things that we want to go over housekeeping wise. Sorry, my computer is being a little bit slow this tonight. There we go. All right. So one of the most important things is how do you ask a question? And I'll remind everybody of this as we get a little bit closer to the question and answer portion of the night. But you can use that question and answer box at the bottom of your screen. That's what a lot of people like to do. That way you can type your question in, and as we're kind of talking through the presentation, you don't lose your train of thought. You can also raise your hand. If we have folks calling in, which I will check that, and I will make sure to remind people how to do this as well when that time comes, but they can press #2 on their phone to raise their hand, which makes it pretty convenient. All right, so a little bit about how things are going to work tonight. I will talk through an agenda, but I always like to just mention that the evening is going to have some distinct portions. So first, we're going to do a little bit of introductions, and then we're going to have our permit engineer and the supervisor in our Kalamazoo District Office, which I'll introduce in just a few minutes, do a presentation about the proposed permits. So that part will kind of just be talking to you. After that, we'll get to a question and answer portion. So that's where typing those questions into the question box will be really helpful. We'll be able to hopefully have a little bit of dialogue, hopefully be able to answer some questions that you might have. In the interim, Caitlin DeVries is going to be sharing some information in the chat. So make sure you kind of keep your eye on that. She'll be sharing some links with all of you. And then the next part of the night will be the formal hearing. So once we get to that formal hearing portion, that's where we're going to just be taking comments about the proposed permits on the record. So we won't be responding to you. I'll go over this again once we get to that section, but I like to just let people know that we're going to kind of do a few different sort of sections tonight. Another thing that we like to talk about before we get into the nitty-gritty of the evening is the group norms for this meeting. So as just a preamble, this slide was developed with some environmental advocates that we work with in the Flint area. And it's just to kind of help us set the stage for a great meeting tonight. So one of the things we want to talk about is just listen actively with an ear to understanding. So of course, we're here to kind of give you some information, but we also hope that you'll ask questions and request clarification if what we're saying, it doesn't make sense, or you want a little bit more information about that. We want to make sure that if we're critical of ideas and not the people here who came to chat with you or your neighbors or anyone else on the meeting tonight. We want to just make sure that that communication stays very respectful and take space and make space. And what that means is we want to make sure that everyone who would like to ask a question or make a comment tonight has that opportunity to do so. All right, before we get into the agenda, I do want to introduce my Air Quality Division staff and my Environmental Support Division staff that are here too. But the first person I want to introduce to you tonight is Annette Switzer. So Annette is our Division Director. She's here with Air Quality Division. So she's going to introduce herself. I know she wants to welcome everybody to the meeting. So Annette, whenever you're ready, go right ahead and take the mic.
Thank you, Jen. And hello, everyone. I'm Annette Switzer, the Director of the Air Quality Division and the decision maker for this permit. We're really glad you could join us virtually tonight. Feel free to ask questions, share your thoughts, and provide comments that you have on the proposed air permit. I will be paying close attention to everything that is discussed this evening. Connecting with community members is a key part of our permitting process, and your input often leads to meaningful improvements. Tonight, my team will walk through how we evaluate permit applications, the type of comments we can consider in our decisions. We'll also give the overview of the draft permit in detail, pointing out specific aspects that may be of interest to you. I'm going to hand it back over to Jen now to continue with the meeting. As I mentioned, I'll be listening closely to the discussion and the hearing. I encourage you to ask questions and share your comments. Thanks for being here again with us this evening. Jen, back to you.
Thank you, Annette. So if the rest of the folks could turn their cameras on, I will just run through these introductions pretty quickly. You will hear from these folks as we go through the evening tonight. So the first person I want to introduce to you is Tom Herkula. So Tom is our permit engineer, and he's going to be the person that you hear the most from during the presentation portion tonight. I also have Monica Brothers, like I mentioned, she's a supervisor in our Kalamazoo district office. She's going to talk to you about what the district's role is, what the inspector's role is with companies like this. We also have a couple others on our panel tonight. We have Keisha Williams. She's our toxicologist. So toxicologists work with permit engineers on these kinds of projects. They also work to develop health-based screening levels that are used in the permitting process. And then I have Jim Haywood on with us as well. And he's one of our meteorologists and he works on air modeling. So he'll talk to you a little bit more about that if you like. Tom will talk a little bit about that too, but just as a very broad stroke, what Jim does is use computers to look to see what sort of impacts potential pollutants might have. So that's always something that's kind of interesting for folks to hear about as well. And then I also have Caitlin DeVries and Natalie Brown. They're with our Environmental Support Division. So we couldn't do this meeting without them. So I just want to make sure I thank them. They will definitely be pushing stuff out in the chat to all of you, some links and things that we're talking about as we go. So if you feel comfortable grabbing those, that would be probably helpful for you. So Tom, if you want to keep your camera on, and then the rest of you, if you guys can go ahead and turn your cameras off for now, I'll invite you to turn them on in a little bit. So just again, as a reminder, we're going to have that information session. That will be a presentation on the permitting process. We'll dig a little bit into the proposed permits. Tom will give you some details on what the companies are proposing, things like that. We'll get to that question and answer session. So like I said, type those questions into your Q&A box if you like as he goes along. Once we get done with the question and answer session, so what we'll do is we'll end that at 7 o'clock or whenever you guys are done asking questions, whichever comes first. So try to just make sure we have enough time to take those comments on the record. So once we get done with the question and answer, we'll get right into that public hearing portion of the night. We'll also talk about other ways that you can submit public comments. So tonight is not the only way that you can do that. A lot of times people think we have to come to the meeting, we have to get this is how we have to get our comments. We've already gotten some comments on these permits, so that's great. And I will talk to you about other ways that you can do that all the way up until July 28th. We'll talk to you, like I said, about where you can find other information. I know Caitlin's going to be sharing that stuff in the chat though as well. But we will also talk to you about how you can get a hold of the folks here tonight if you have further questions. And then I don't think I mentioned this yet either, but once we send that follow-up email out after the meeting's over, usually Caitlin will send it out in the next couple of days. That will include a link to the presentation, the recording of the presentation, and then she also usually sends out a copy of the slides too. So some people like to have that as well. And then she'll send you a bunch of other information about what we talked about during the meeting tonight. So hopefully that will be helpful as well. All right. And then I think, Tom, I'm going to go ahead and pass it over to you. So you should be able to take it over whenever you're ready.
Sounds good. Thank you very much, Jen. Good evening, everyone. And once again, thank you for attending tonight's informational session and public hearing. My name is Tom Herkula, and I am the permit engineer who reviewed DTE and Ford's permit applications. Before we talk a little bit in detail about DTE and Ford, I'd like to go over what we do here at the Air Quality Division and how the permitting process works. The AQD is dedicated to protecting public health and the environment. To do this, we use our authority under state and federal laws to regulate sources of air pollution. We do a lot of different things here at the AQD, such as monitoring levels of air pollutants. We look at toxic air contaminants and other pollutants to protect public health. We conduct inspections of facilities like DTE and Ford. and we review applications and write permits to make sure that the proposed projects comply with state and federal rules. So I'd like to go over now what the proposed permits cover and what we are not able to regulate. We regulate and permit industrial sources. Additionally, we review permit applications based on what a facility is proposing. We're not able to address things like zoning, noise, and traffic. If you have concerns about these issues, you will want to reach out to your local government. When it comes to evaluating public comments on a permit application, it's very important to hear the opinions of residents. However, we cannot base our decision to act on an application on whether residents support or oppose the project or if they believe it is necessary. We evaluate a project to ensure that it meets the applicable air quality rules. If the project can meet those rules, we are required to issue the air permit. So on this slide, I want to just touch on just a quick overview of the air permitting process. First, a company decides that they want to install or modify equipment that has the potential to release air pollutants. This would require what is known as a permit to install, or a PTI. The company then submits a permit application to the AQD. This application is then reviewed by an engineer, such as myself, to decide if their request can meet the state and federal air quality rules. Oftentimes, other air quality staff are involved to help with the review. If the state and federal rules can be met, the engineer creates what is known as a proposed permit. If the permit application goes out to public comment, such as the case with DTE and Ford tonight, the proposed permit or permits are posted for the public to comment. Public comment is a very important part of the permitting process, which is why we're here talking with you tonight. Once the comment period ends, we review and evaluate the submitted comments, and the comments can lead to changes in the permit as well as the final decision. Finally, a decision is made on the proposed permit. Now, the permit can be approved without changes. It can be approved with changes based on comments we receive, or in some cases, it can be denied. But remember, this decision is based on whether or not what the company is requesting can meet state and federal rules. So on the next couple of slides, I'm going to go into a little bit more detail about DTE and Ford's proposed projects. And on this slide, I'll talk a little bit about DTE's proposed project. DTE is proposing to install a combined heat and power plant. And they intend to produce electricity and chilled water for Ford's facility. I'm not going to go into a little bit more detail about the proposed process. So first, fuel and air will be pre-mixed and will enter what is known as a combustion turbine generator. The combustion turbine generator creates electricity that will be sent to Ford's buildings. Hot exhaust gases will be created by the combustion turbine generator, and those will be sent to a heat recovery steam generator. Water will be injected into the heat recovery steam generator to cool the hot exhaust gases from the combustion turbine generators before they're released to the atmosphere. The resulting steam or hot water will be sent to cooling towers meant to cool the water. And this chilled water will also be sent to Ford's buildings. The heat recovery steam generator, as I mentioned earlier, will release exhaust gases into the atmosphere. And additionally, the cooling towers will release warm, moist air into the atmosphere. During construction of the combined heat and power plant, DTE will install 2 temporary boilers that will provide heat to Ford's facility during construction. These boilers will be removed from the site when DTE's combined heat and power plant is fully operational. On this slide, I'll talk a little bit more about Ford's proposed project. Ford is proposing to install and operate a facility to build lithium-ion battery cells for electric vehicles. On this slide, you're going to see a series of blue squares and green ovals. The blue squares represent a piece of process equipment, and the green ovals represent a pollution control device. Pollution control devices are designed to reduce one or more types of air pollution. The first step in the process is what is known as electrode manufacturing. And this is where the electrodes that will go into the battery are made. Electrode manufacturing can release various air pollutants. To reduce the amount that go to the outside air, certain pollution control devices will be installed. The control devices include activated carbon towers, dust collectors, and concentrators. These concentrators are connected to condensers that will send solvent to a distillation unit. The distillation unit will be used to recover solvents and reuse them in the manufacturing process. This reduces the amount of solvents that will be released to the outside air. The second step in the battery manufacturing process is what is known as battery cell assembly. And this is where the electrodes made from the previous step are used to create battery cells. Dust collectors will be installed to reduce the amount of pollutants that will be released. The third step is what is known as battery cell formation. And this is where battery cells are injected with electrolyte solution and sealed before being sent to a packaging area. To minimize the release of air pollutants, dust collectors, activated carbon towers, and a setup of control devices will be used. This setup of control devices is made up of wet scrubbers, dust collectors, and regenerative thermal oxidizers back to back. These control devices will help control multiple different types of pollutants. Ford will also use cleaning solvents at the facility. They'll also have storage tanks for electrolyte solution, as well as solvents that are used in the manufacturing process. Ford also plans to install emergency combustion equipment, such as generators and fire pumps, that will operate in the event of an emergency. So when we review a permit application submitted by a company, we often work with other air quality staff. And this work includes things like reviewing state and federal regulations that may apply to a project, evaluating proposed emissions from a project, and air toxics review to make sure that toxic air contaminants can meet our health-based screening levels, and air modeling for criteria pollutants and toxic air contaminants when necessary. The goal of our review is to make sure that DTE and Ford's proposed projects can meet the required state and federal rules. On the next couple of slides, I'm going to go into a little bit more detail about the different parts of the permit review. So when we talk about an air pollutant is a substance that is released into the environment by industrial sources. And there are three categories that a pollutant can fall into. The first group are what are known as criteria pollutants. This group contains 6 well-studied and regulated pollutants, including sulfur dioxide, oxides of nitrogen, carbon monoxide, particulate matter, ozone, and lead. The U.S. Environmental Protection Agency sets national ambient air quality standards, referred to as NAAQS, for these criteria pollutants to protect public health and the environment. Any releases of these pollutants must be below the level set by the NAAQS. The second group of pollutants are what are known as hazardous air pollutants, or HAPs. The current list of hazardous air pollutants includes 188 pollutants that are known or suspected to cause health or environmental effects. We regulate these pollutants by applying federal regulations known as NESHAPs and making sure that a facility can comply with those regulations. The third group of pollutants are what are known as toxic air contaminants, or TACs. These are a group of pollutants that are covered by state of Michigan rules, whereas the other two groups fall under federal regulations. Toxic air contaminants include almost any pollutant that is not a criteria pollutant, including hazardous air pollutants. Based on the state of Michigan's rules, our toxicologists set health-based screening levels for toxic air contaminants that must be met by a company. For DTE and Ford's proposed projects, pollutants from all three categories were reviewed. So when we reviewed potential emissions from DTE and Ford's facility, we reviewed them together. So the potential pollutants from DTE and Ford, the potential pollutants that DTE and Ford could release were looked at together. This table contains several pollutants, as well as the potential amount of these pollutants that the facilities could release in total. The potential emission of oxides of nitrogen, or NOx, is greater than 100 tons per year total. So DTE and Ford will need what is known as a renewable operating permit. This type of permit requires renewal every 5 years. Additionally, the renewable operating permit requires more record keeping, more testing, and more frequent inspections. There are also certain fees that are associated with a renewable operating permit as opposed to a permit to install. All other pollutants have potential to emit of less than 100 tons per year total. So on this slide, I'm going to talk a little bit about toxic air contaminants and our health-based screening levels. These screening levels are designed to protect against certain health issues, such as developing cancer or breathing problems. When we performed our review, we looked at the maximum emission rates of all toxic air contaminants from DTE and Ford together. Our review determined that releases would not violate health-based screening levels. More detailed information about the technical aspects of the toxics review can be found in the technical fact sheet in MyEnviro. MyEnviro is the AQD's new online platform for accessing documents. We also performed air modeling for these proposed projects. And air modeling essentially uses computers to predict the effects on air quality. Modeling is very important to the permit review process because it tells us what concentrations of pollutants residents could be exposed to under the worst case scenarios. The modeling simulates a grid of virtual air monitors surrounding the facility, and this allows the highest concentrations of pollutants to be considered. DTE and Ford's applications were treated as one stationary source for modeling, which means their potential releases were evaluated together. Part of DTE and Ford's toxics review included computer modeling. Additionally, oxides of nitrogen, particulate matter less than or equal to 2.5 microns in diameter, and particulate matter less than or equal to 10 microns in diameter were also modeled. It was determined that DTE and Ford would be able to meet the federal standards for criteria pollutants, as well as Michigan's health-based screening levels for toxic air contaminants. So once we finish reviewing an application, we draft what is known as a proposed permit. Now, a permit is a document with conditions that a company must comply with. The permit conditions ensure that the project operates as described in the application and in the way it was reviewed by us. I just want to make a note here that DTE and Ford will have separate permits. So each company will be responsible for the conditions in their own permit and not the conditions in the other company's permit. This slide lists just some of the conditions that are in DTE's proposed permit. DTE will have a limit on the amount of some pollutants they can release, including oxides of nitrogen, carbon monoxide, particulate matter less than or equal to 2.5 microns in diameter, and formaldehyde. DTE will also be required to test the combustion turbine generators and the heat recovery steam generators. And this testing will be for oxides of nitrogen, carbon monoxide, and particulate matter less than or equal to 2.5 microns in diameter. The purpose of this testing is to verify the emission rates provided to the AQD by DTE. DTE will have limits on the size of the combustion turbine generators and the heat recovery steam generators. They also will have limits on the amount of startups and shutdowns they can perform with the combustion turbine generators. DTE must also maintain records and provide them to inspectors when requested. And these records can include things like the amount of fuel burned, monthly heat input calculations, monthly emission calculations, or testing results. So on this slide, I'll talk for a little bit about some of the conditions that will be in Ford's proposed permit. Like DTE, Ford will have emission limits for certain pollutants, including volatile organic compounds, particulate matter less than 2.5 microns in diameter, formaldehyde, and acetone. Ford will also be required to test various pieces of equipment for volatile organic compounds and particulate matter less than or equal to 2.5 microns in diameter. And again, this is to ensure that the emission calculations provided by Ford are accurate. Ford will also be required to have malfunction abatement plans before operating any of their equipment. A malfunction abatement plan will provide a guide on how to prevent, detect, and correct any equipment failures or malfunctions. Ford's control devices will have restrictions on their design flow rates to match what we reviewed in their application. Ford must also maintain records similar to DTE and provide them to inspectors when requested. On the next slide, we will talk a little bit about the inspection process at facilities like DTE and Ford. Monica Brothers is the supervisor of the Kalamazoo District Office, and she will go into a little bit more detail about inspections.
Thanks, Tom. Hi, everyone. I am Monica Brothers, and I'm the Kalamazoo District Supervisor for Air Quality. I'm going to give you a little bit of a background about how we inspect facilities and how we will make sure that Ford and DTE are complying with this permit once it's issued. So these facilities will be considered major sources, and therefore they will be inspected at least every other year. We can also conduct inspections more frequently than that in response to complaints or any other concerns that we might have. So during the inspection, we determine compliance with their permit and all other applicable state and federal regulations during that inspection. There are two main parts of an inspection. One is the facility walkthrough, and then the other part is a records review. So during the facility walkthrough, we take a look at all of the processes and then all of the associated pollution control equipment. For example, these facilities have things like scrubbers, dust collectors, and a regenerative thermal oxidizer. So we make sure this equipment is operating properly and within the appropriate ranges for those pieces of equipment. The second part of an inspection is a records review where the inspectors will request records from the facility, which might include material usage, so usage of any materials that they use, and also emissions calculations that they've conducted. And then we make sure that those records fall under the limits in their permit. Also, during an inspection, we can assess odors, any odors on site or any odors that might be leaving the site. And also we can look at the stacks and see if there's any opacity coming from the stacks at that time. And Tom, I'll pass it back over to you.
I think it goes to me, Monica, so that's
all
good.
right. Sorry, Jen.
Tom and I
Pass it
don't
to
quite
you.
look the same, but that's okay. I appreciate it. It's all good. Thanks to both you and Tom for walking us through that. I already see some questions coming in the chat, so that is great. If I can have Tom and Jim and Keisha go ahead and turn your cameras on, and we will get right into the question and answer portion of the night. So thanks everybody for writing questions, and that is great. Like I mentioned at the beginning, we do have some folks calling in. So if you're calling in and you would like to ask a question, please go ahead and just type #2 on your phone. And that should let us open your line so that you can ask a question verbally. So up to you. And then the other thing I wanted to just remind everybody is we'll do the question and answer up till 7 o'clock or whenever we're kind of done with questions, whatever comes first. So just wanted to remind folks of those couple things, but we'll get started here on the Q&A. So the first person sent in a bunch of questions. So I'm going to try to handle them sort of one by one, just so folks can hear all of them. So the first one I wanted to address though here is there was some concerns about constant air pollution caused by the construction companies. So Monica, I know we had some conversations about this recently, and I think what I'd like you to do is just talk a little bit about how people can let you know that's going on and who in the office, even if it's not, you and your team, who is kind of handling that stuff and how folks can get a hold of us, if you don't
Yep.
mind.
Yeah. So the construction portion of this project is handled a little bit differently than if there was, some dust from the finished project here. But we have gotten some dust complaints from the construction over there. But that typically falls under the Water Resources Division for construction over an acre large. So we typically refer those complaints over to them. We have been out a few times to assess those dust complaints, though. For any kind of dust complaint or odors that might exist afterwards, those would be handled by the district. And you can call me or Jared Edgerton, who's out on parental leave right now, would handle those normally. But right now, Cody Yazzie in our office would be handling those complaints.
So you're fine with folks getting a hold of you. We're going to give everybody contact information at the end here. We'll also talk about how you can do online complaints too. We kind of take them whatever way you want to give them to us, but we definitely want to know if people are having concerns or if there are issues going on. Like Monica said, during construction, it's a little bit different, but she's more than happy to get the word over to our counterparts there in our Water Resources Division. So one of the other questions, Tom, I think you might be able to answer this one, but if you can't, we might have to get back to the person on this. But the question was, will Ford and DTE have an emergency service plan? So I don't know if that's a specific plan that would be in a permit or if that's something outside that they would have with like the fire department or something.
Yeah, so I don't necessarily know about an emergency services plan. I know, like I said, Ford's equipment will have malfunction abatement plans, and part of those malfunction abatement plans will be ways to mitigate concerns in the event of equipment failure or other like a control device failure or anything like that. In terms of the emergency services plan, I think we might have to get back on that one. I'm not 100% sure on that.
No, that's okay.
We can probably get some more information on
I think
that.
it's a little outside of our purview. I thought that you might have known about that. So we can definitely find out though and get back to folks on that one. So apologies. We might not have all the answers, but we will do our best and we will definitely follow up on anything we can't answer tonight. The other question that came in was, is there going to be an air monitor or station for day-to-day operations? So I know, Tom, you talked a lot about how the proposed permits incorporate record keeping, reporting. There's a lot of monitoring that goes on of the equipment in and of itself that the company has to keep track of. So that would be something that would happen after the permit is issued. There's no requirement, at least, and correct me if I'm wrong, for a specific monitor, like an air monitor. These would all be monitors on equipment. Is that correct?
That is correct. Yes.
So that's all a little bit tied in, and we can answer some specific questions on that too if folks have it. Jim is going to talk probably in a little bit about how the modeling shows whether or not, the contaminants that the company is requesting to emit will impact facilities or people around the area. So sometimes those things kind of tie in together. It's extremely rare for companies to have their own specific air monitors. Those things are usually handled in like those other ways through permitting. But we can talk a little bit more about that later too if folks would like to. This is a question for you, Tom, about the testing of the NOx. So The question was, how often does DTE have to test NOx from the combustion turbines?
So, and sorry, I don't have the permit exactly in front of me, but I believe NOx is required to be tested within 1 year of operation. And that would be for the combustion turbine generators, the heat recovery steam generators, as well as other ancillary equipment. Additionally, because the stationary source is subject to a renewable operating permit, they will be required to perform testing at a minimum of once every 5 years after that. So there is an initial test for NOx for the turbines and for the heat recovery steam generators. And then there's additional testing based on the requirements of the ROP, or the renewable operating permit.
Yeah, this is a good tie-in because thanks for talking that through. And then you mentioned another term that we use often here in air quality, but I just want to make sure folks know about it. You said stationary source. So basically, this goes into one of the other questions that we got here, which is there one permit or is there two permits? So it is complicated. And so I'm going to talk about it, Tom, and then I want you to tell me if I did a good job on this one. So, like Tom mentioned, DTE has their own permit application, their own processes, and they have their own proposed permit. Ford also has their own processes, their own application, and their own proposed permit. The way the rules work is if those two facilities are close enough or they have operations that tie together in a certain way, the Environmental Protection Agency, the federal agency, has a term they call a stationary source. Basically, that means that then those two companies, even though they operate pretty much independently, they are considered one source. So when Tom was talking about then they would have to get this other type of permit, that permit would basically be one big permit that both of those facilities would be in. So they would still have their own conditions, but eventually they would end up being in one permit. So how did I do on that one, Tom?
Pretty good, actually.
Pretty good? Okay.
That was pretty good. Yeah. So in this case, because DTE is essentially support equipment for Ford's facility, they're providing heat and power solely to Ford's facility, and they're not sending any to the grid or anything like that. Because they are solely operating on Ford, we would look at this project as one stationary source. So we would look at emissions from both DTE and Ford's facilities.
Good. Yep, that makes sense. And again, that's kind of an interesting term and something that can get a little complicated. So if you need clarification on that, definitely ask more questions. We would appreciate it. And we want to make sure that we're communicating with that appropriately. Okay, this is an interesting one too. So this goes back to you, Tom, and how the permits are set up when it comes to specific types of monitoring equipment. So there's a lot of processes, there's a lot of control equipment. The question is, will that monitoring equipment that Ford has have any automatic shutdowns? Like at what level would a shutdown happen? And then how often is the monitoring equipment tested and inspected by EGLE? So I know Monica talked a little bit about the inspection portion of it, but I don't know if you can talk a little bit more about the requirements in the actual permit.
Yeah. So in regard to Ford's equipment, their control devices have certain concentration limits. So the outlet concentration of a certain pollutant cannot exceed a set value. And those set values are in the permit. They are required to do periodic monitoring. I don't know an exact value of where an automatic shutdown would occur, but I do know that they do have the ability to shut down in the event the concentrations get too high. And I know that from what I reviewed, I know that value would be less than the concentrations that are in the permit. So ideally, if they receive a concentration reading or if they go out and take a reading that's too high, the equipment shuts down, it would be at a value that is less than what is in the permit. So there's an extra little layer of conservatism with how their monitoring works.
Okay. No, thanks for that. It can be, that can also be something that's kind of complicated when there's a lot of different processes too. So we can answer some more specific questions later on if that is helpful. This one is for you too, Tom, and I'm not sure if you know this or not, and I'm trying to think back about some of the information that we had put out, but this is related to the storage tanks and for the NMP solvent and for the electrolyte. And I'm going to kind of combine these together because some of the question is a little bit the same. But the question was, are those storage tanks going to have secondary containment? And if so, is that secondary containment going to be open to the atmosphere?
So I'm not 100% sure about the secondary containment. I do know that all of the tanks are going to be designed with submerged fill piping, and that helps to eliminate any splashing. The tanks will also be fitted with overfill protection to prevent any spillage in the event of a malfunction or whatnot. In in terms of emissions to the atmosphere, not just related to the secondary containment, but just for the tanks themselves, we did review emissions from the tanks. Ford provided us with calculations. We reviewed and confirmed them. So while the emissions may be fairly low, they were looked at and they were reviewed. I do know they have like I mentioned, the submerged fill and the overfill protection. Regarding the secondary containment, I may have to get back on that one. I'm not
Okay.
100% sure. Again, it's not entirely within the realm of air, but it's close enough where I can certainly get back to you on that part.
Yeah, no, I think that's great. And I guess my question would be to follow up, are the tanks in the building or are they all outside?
To my knowledge, they are outside.
Okay.
Again, I can confirm when I follow up, I can confirm that, but I believe they're
Yep.
outside.
That's great. Yeah, and we did have a question of for questions we don't quite have the answer to. So how will we follow up? So we will follow up using your email that you registered or signed into this meeting. So if you have a different email or a different way that you'd like us to contact you, definitely let us know that. We're also happy to have a phone conversation, whatever works best for folks online. So there's some other questions about the storage tanks, which I think that we probably don't know right now either, that we can definitely find out. And those questions are related to whether the tanks are above grade, how the piping is working and stuff like that. So we'll just plan to get back to the questioner on this because it is the same person on this, and I'll make sure that we have all these questions documented. So thank you for sending those in. I apologize that we aren't able to answer those adequately for you tonight. Okay, so this question is a little bit more about the air monitoring station and why there isn't one required at the facility instead of at the site in Kalamazoo. That monitoring station is 25 miles away, and the emissions from Ford and DTE and future industry might have an impact on air quality. And so why isn't there a monitoring station there? So unfortunately, we don't have one of our air monitoring staff on the call tonight, so I apologize for that as well. And we can have someone chat with you if that's helpful. But I do think it might be helpful to hear from Jim how the modeling works to sort of look at this. Air monitoring isn't, this kind of air monitoring isn't that you're talking about, those stations like we have in Kalamazoo. They're not designed to track emissions from specific facilities. They're designed to track emissions that are more of just outdoor air. So we wouldn't be tying any of those back to Ford or DTE or any specific industry. The one in Kalamazoo is looking at, the outdoor air in Kalamazoo. So the network of all the stations work together to kind of give us an idea of the air quality in the state. So Jim, as one of our meteorologists, also as his other part of his job, helps forecast when we're going to have air quality alerts and advisories. So he has a lot of familiarity with how we use air monitors to make sure that folks in the state know what's going on. But I do think it would be helpful to talk about the modeling a little bit, Jim, if you don't mind. I think people sometimes don't understand how that plays in and how we, like I like to say, future cast what it might look like. But yeah, if you don't mind, I think that could be helpful for folks too.
Sure. Now, I'll touch base real quickly on the monitoring as well. Uh, a lot of it is economics. It's very expensive to install and keep one of these monitors running, typically on the order of about $100,000 per year, and we have a limited budget. So when we put a monitor out there, we want to get our best bang for our buck. And so we put them where we expect to have the worst air quality, which is typically your more urban areas. We have a lot of monitors down in the Detroit areas. We have monitors in Flint, Grand Rapids, Lansing, Kalamazoo, as you mentioned. We have a network of monitors for ozone that go up and down the lake shore. Those have to suffice. In terms of a project like this, it probably really isn't going to be that useful for us, except it does give us an idea of what the background air quality is before the facility is built. And that's where the beauty of modeling comes in. Because as Jen said, we can future cast with that. Before we can get a permit out to an applicant, we have to be assured that the emissions to the atmosphere aren't going to cause or contribute to any violation of air quality standards. To put a monitor out there at that point in time isn't going to do us any good because the facility hasn't been built yet. And so it can't tell us whether or not that facility will cause or contribute to a violation. But an air model can do that. And what we do is we build a model inside the mind of a computer. It's a pretty complicated model. It's provided to us by EPA. It's maintained and upgraded every year by EPA. And we have certain assumptions. We assume always that the facility that we are modeling is emitting worst case 24/7. So whatever permit limit that they get in their permit, we assume they're doing that all the time. In reality, they're going to be operating less than that. They like to give themselves a little bit of a safety buffer there. We also include surrounding facilities. In this case, we even included facilities that aren't even built yet. The Marshall Energy Center has got a permit. It's never been built, but since they have a permit and they could build, we include that in the model, along with some other facilities around there with the same assumptions that they are operating 24/7 as at their maximum legal capacity. We also add the background concentration, and that's where the monitor in Kalamazoo came in. We are assuming that when the facility emits to the atmosphere, the background air is already dirty. It's already as dirty as we ever see it, according to that monitor. So it's a lot of conservative assumptions that we pile on top of each other to get what we call a worst case impact. And how do we do it? We set up a grid of what we call virtual monitors. And so instead of having one brick and mortar monitor out there, we could have tens of thousands of these virtual monitors out there. And while it might be great to have that one monitor out there that will tell us what the air is at that one point, it doesn't necessarily tell us what the air is going to be 6 blocks away. The air model will, because we will have those virtual receptors literally everywhere. We typically space them about either 25 meters apart, 50 meters apart, very close. Theoretically, you could have one of these virtual meters in your front yard and your backyard. You could have one at your school, your grocery store, everywhere. And we have had projects where we've had up to about 25,000 of these virtual monitors surrounding the facility. What the model will do, again, assuming worst case emissions from the applicant, the worst case emissions from existing facilities, and the worst case background concentration, it will produce and calculate an impact of what the air we expect the air to be at each one of those virtual monitors. Every single one of those monitors has to pass state and federal thresholds. If they don't, then I go back to the permit engineer, Tom in this case, and say, sorry, it fails. We are exceeding the threshold by 10%, 20%, 100%, whatever. Tom then has to sit down with the applicant and say, look, I cannot issue a permit because you're failing the model. We are predicting a violation to air quality standards. And they will work that out. And there's different ways they can increase control standards. They can lower emissions. They can raise stack heights. There's a lot of different things they can do. And it's a back and forth process until we get to a point that every one of those virtual monitors pass. In theory, we're only worried about one, the one that gives us the highest number. And that has to pass every state and federal regulation out there for all the pollutants. So hopefully I didn't get too far into the weeds. Jen, you can pull me back if I got too far.
No, I think that's good. I wish we had the picture up because I do. The thing that always hits me when you talk about how the model works, and I remember the time when you were talking to a young lady at a different hearing, and you said, and she was concerned about emissions around her home. And you said, asked her where she lived, and she told you, and then you were like, "There's probably a model right outside your window, or a monitor, a virtual monitor right outside your window." And I think that's the value of being able to do these predictions, and that if even one doesn't pass, then the whole project can't go forward. And so, there is a lot of levels of conservatism built into this because we do want to ensure that the people around these proposed facilities are protected. I mean, it is a huge part of why we do modeling. So, no, I don't think you went too far in the weeds, but people will let us know for sure. There's a comment that kind of came in, comment sort of question, so I just want to reference it. Like, what about if the air monitor was located in Marshall? That could be a different place. So, what I wanted to just mention is that every year our air monitoring staff put out their network plan. It's called the network plan. We call our air monitors around the state a network. And that is open for comment every year. I'll definitely pass that recommendation on to our air monitoring staff, but we can also share out, we always advertise when that one is open for comment. So that would be a really nice comment to get on there. And sometimes they do end up changing where the monitoring stations are. And so it's definitely valuable to include that. There was another comment that came in about attainment. So the commenter asked, is Calhoun County, where these facilities would be located, in attainment for those national ambient air quality standards that Tom talked about and that Jim just referenced as well. And so I'll talk a little bit about it, but if anyone wants to chime in more, feel free. So at this time, Calhoun County is attaining all of those national ambient air quality standards. The closest county that we have recommended be put in non-attainment is Kalamazoo County. And then the other counties are on the east side of the state, Wayne County for particulate matter. And then we do have some counties on the west shore that are in non-attainment for ozone. So Calhoun County is currently in attainment for all the pollutants that we're talking about, those national ambient air quality standards. So did I miss anything, panelists? I want to just make sure that I got that one. Okay. I'm just looking at, want to kind of saving all the questions about the tanks in there too. Okay. Yes, so this is just another comment about more of a comment. So, I'll kind of talk about it, but definitely as I think it's important to put in as an official comment. So I just want to encourage people to do that as well. The comment is just cost should not be a restraint for this project. The state has been spending hundreds of millions of dollars already, and Ford and DTE have plenty of money to pay for a monitoring station. So I do think that is a good comment to put in the comment period so that that's officially on the record. And that will be something that then our staff will have to evaluate. So that's why we want people to put those in as comments for sure. So I'm not exactly sure what this means, but I might have an inkling. So the question is, are field tests done to verify the model when modeling is done at this site or other sites, I'm assuming, and other facilities? How often is this done? So I think I want to, in my head, kind of tie that into the testing, but Jim, I saw you come off mute. So did you have some thoughts on that?
I do, yeah. It's not going to be any field test done to verify the model for this particular applications or really any particular application. Where there were field tests done is when EPA was writing this model, and it was a project that took several years and a lot of really bright people down at EPA. What they did is they did go out And they did do a comprehensive field test study of this model against actual monitored concentration. What they did, and again, I don't want to get too far off into the weeds with limited time, is they emitted a element that is not found in nature. It had to be created in a lab. So it's not contaminated by anything. It's not being biased by anything that's already in the air. They released this compound into the air, and then they modeled it, and then they picked it up in a monitor. And so they compared the results to see how well that the model worked. And the model actually worked very well. I can't give you an exact number, but probably within 10% the modeled impact compared with the monitor impact. How often is it done? It probably was only done when it was in production mode. And they were pretty happy with it at that point. So it's a costly thing to do. So it was just done when these models first come out after they've been written.
Okay. Yeah, no, thanks for talking through that. I think it is always interesting when we have folks on that have some experience in these things and ask questions that get into the weeds. I kind of like it. This question is, I'm going to put this one on you too, Jim. And again, if it's a little too in the weeds, even for you, don't feel like you have to answer it. But the question is, are Kalamazoo and Calhoun in the same region related to the CMAQ? And I'm not going to try to remember what that acronym means. I apologize. I did know at one point, but I know I don't know at this moment. So therefore, how does that attainment status work? So I don't know if you know that or not. I know I've heard Erica and folks talk about it, but I wouldn't be able to give an intelligent answer.
I'm not a total expert in that. We call it the CMAQ model. It's a photochemical model. They use that one to predict what ozone concentrations will be on a large regional scale, along with the PM2.5. Kalamazoo, Calhoun are very close together. They probably are not in the same grid cell. Unlike the models that we use, they use particular points for our virtual monitors. These kind of models use these squares, like 4-kilometer squares. And so they're not going to be in those same 4-kilometer or 12-kilometer squares. But certainly in those CMAQ models, and there's another one that's called a CAMEX model that does the same thing. They're regional models, and they cover the whole Midwest. They cover the whole, well, basically they cover the whole United States, but they our people who run those models for us, and we don't do that internally, use a fairly fine grid of about a 4-kilometer by 4-kilometer virtual monitor space. So that's really getting off into the weeds, but
Yeah.
you know, whoever
Interesting.
asked that one, if they want to get into a deeper conversation with that one, we can certainly do that offline.
Okay. Yeah, no, that sounds great. And like I mentioned earlier, we will be sharing how you can get a hold of Jim or Tom or Monica or Keisha if you have further questions. So I think what we're going to do now is shift over into that public comment portion of the night. I greatly appreciate everybody's questions tonight. This has been a really good conversation and glad to hear the things that folks are interested in. And we definitely want to make sure that we're clarifying some of those things. So again, just letting you know that sometimes we anticipate what questions people might have, and tonight we kind of didn't do that with the tanks questions. So we'll definitely get those responses back. We did have a comment on, could we share that more broadly in addition to just the people who asked the question. So we'll try to figure out a way that we can do that as well. But with that being said, thank you, panelists. Greatly appreciate your participation in the conversation tonight. Annette, if you want to turn your camera on, we'll go ahead and shift over into that hearing portion of the night. So while you're getting your camera on, and my panelists, if you guys want, you can go ahead and turn your cameras off, get a drink, or relax for a second here. So before we get into the public hearing, I do want to talk a little bit about public comment. So a lot of times people ask questions, what is a good comment? What's going to make a difference? You heard Tom talk about, and Annette already talked about how public comments can have an impact on final decisions and, what gets put in a permit. We had some comments that came into the question box tonight that were definitely comments that could easily be put in as official comments. So like Tom mentioned in the beginning, you can comment on anything that you want. sometimes there are things that are going to be more likely to make an impact than others. So when we're talking about things that are more likely to lead to changes, we're going to be thinking about things that are going to be focused on the content and the basis of that proposed permit. Specific things that people might want to see changed. Things that won't necessarily lead to changes in the permit are things that are going to be outside of the scope, or whether it's supported or opposed by the community. That's not going to be something that we can take into account when we are making a decision on a proposed permit. We have to look at whether or not it meets those air quality rules and regulations. So hopefully that's helpful. Again, as I mentioned, you do not have to make a comment tonight. If you want to comment, the comment period will be open until July 28th. So there's talk about the other ways that you can make a comment here in just a minute. So let's get into that hearing. The computer is just being a little slow today, so I apologize for that. If it goes ahead too much, I apologize for that too. So to open the hearing, I have to read basically an opening statement, and then we will get into folks who would like to make a comment. All right, so good evening and welcome to this public hearing. My name is Jennifer Dixon, and I am with the Michigan Department of Environment, Great Lakes, and Energy. And I'll be the hearing officer tonight. Annette Switzer, our Air Quality Division Director, is the decision maker for this permit application, and she'll be listening to your comments this evening. She'll consider all comments before making a decision. This hearing is related to a request from DTE Marshall, LLC, and Ford Motor Company Blue Oval Battery Plant located in Marshall, Michigan. The requests are to install and operate a combined heat and power plant and a lithium-ion battery manufacturing plant, respectively. The Air Quality Division regulates sources of air pollutants to minimize adverse impacts on public health and the environment. The law governing those responsibilities is Part 55 of the Natural Resources and Environmental Protection Act. Before the company can install and operate any new equipment, it must obtain a permit that meets the requirements of Michigan's air quality laws. This means the equipment must be capable of meeting state and federal emission standards, including health-based standards. The proposed permits must also contain conditions that include emission limits and specific ways of operating the equipment to ensure these standards are met. The purpose of tonight's hearing is to allow anyone interested in the proposed permits to provide information we can use in deciding whether to approve the permit or if there are additional issues to consider. The proposed permit is still a draft permit. The proposed permits are still draft permits, apologies. This does not mean a decision has been made. Instead, it reflects an initial technical review of the proposals. We hope having the details of the draft permits will help you provide comments. Everything in the draft permits remains open for comment and further consideration, including whether the permits will be granted at all. As we review comments, we can only use the information you provide to make changes if it is within our authority. So, for example, comments about local zoning, truck traffic, and noise cannot be considered as part of the decision. Some of you may want to simply express your support or opposition to the proposed project. We're happy to note your position, but please understand the department is by law not allowed to base our decision on whether there is widespread support or opposition to the proposed project. This hearing is being recorded, and your comments will be part of the information we consider in making a decision. The public comment period began on June 12 and will end at midnight on July 28, 2025. Additional comments or information may be submitted via written or verbal comment during this hearing, by email, or by voicemail. After the public comment period closes, all written and verbal comments will be reviewed. All significant air quality related comments will be considered, at which point the decision maker makes the final decision. The decision maker may deny the permit, approve as drafted, or approve with amendments. If approved, the decision must specify which provisions of the draft permit, if any, have been changed in the final permit and the reasons for the change. In all three scenarios, all interested parties, including everyone on the original mailing list, anyone who provided comments during the public comment period and/or attended the public hearing, will be directly notified of the decision. The mailing will include a letter from the decision maker regarding the decision and, if applicable, the approved permit. Please recognize our staff are here tonight to provide a fair opportunity for you to express your views on the proposed projects and to listen to your comments. As a reminder, you do not need to comment tonight to have your comment be considered. You may submit a written comment at any time during the comment period by US Post or email, or you may call in a comment to our public comment voicemail. I'll go over how to do all of that after the hearing is over. Those who have joined us online may submit your comment in writing tonight by typing the word comment into the question box. We will limit your comment time, your verbal comment time, to about 3 minutes. And if you're speaking, I will let you know when you have about 30 seconds or so left. I'll begin calling the names of the people who have indicated they would like to make a verbal comment tonight. Once we get through the initial list of anyone else who would like to comment will be able to do so, even if you have not already indicated that you would like to make a comment when you registered for the meeting. So if you would like to make a comment, you're going to just use that raised hand icon at the bottom of your screen. If, like I mentioned, I know we have some folks that have called in. You can go ahead and click #2 on your phone. That's going to raise your hand so that I can tell you would like to make a comment. And then if you don't mind, one other things that we would ask is if you would please state your name and then any affiliation that you have that you'd like to mention for the record before you go into your official comment. So the first person that I have on my list is Barry Wayne Adams. Barry, if you would like to make a comment, you should be able to unmute your line and go ahead and get started whenever you're ready.
Can you hear me?
I sure can. You sound great.
Very good. Thank you. I'm flattered. Yeah, Barry Wayne Adams, 622 West Green Street, Marshall, Michigan. We are here to vigorously place our voice in opposition to what you are trying to accomplish here. Now, I know that you want to avoid the much larger issues of local popularity and violation of zoning procedures and those other aspects, and you want to myopically just concentrate on aspects of environmental contamination. But what you presented so far is not in any way consoling as to what we can expect from what's been going on over there and what we are experiencing in our lives. There has been no effort to say that there's not going to be any releases. It's just we've got lots of neat little ways, very expensive ways to try to limit the amount of toxic release. Well, we don't want toxic release at all. And it is my position, and as well as many others in this city, that for this project, prophylaxis is the best decision. Do not even follow through on this. It's a boondoggle. We were lied to about how this is a part of the green agenda. You even admit that you're just going to have a constant gas turbine putting out exhaust gases, presumably 24 hours a day. Well, we're downwind from that. We don't want all those extra exhaust gases. We don't want toluene and acetone and formaldehyde fumes wafting our way. We don't want the potential of lithium going into a runaway fire, which cannot be put out, even though we're building a bigger firehouse to have more firemen who will just stand around and watch bigger fires. The EV industry is now kaput. It's already obsolete. The technology has been superseded by better battery chemistries, plus advances in hydrogen technology. There's already been over $3 billion of tax dollars thrown away on this boondoggle. But Ford, in the meantime, has already lost 3 times that amount in trying to make this fiasco fly. So we are asking that you do not permit any of this stuff. Stop it, put a cork in it. We don't want to see this thing happen. They've already destroyed 3,000 acres of the best farmland in this county. This is some sort of almost an act of war on the true value of this county, which is It's agricultural resources, the farmland. You're destroying it. Don't do that. I'm talking to you as a human being. You are ruining our environment. Don't try to hide behind environmental regulations that say that, oh, we're not going to have it happen and we'll have ways to patch this up if it happens. We don't want it happening at all. I hope you guys understand this. This is not something that we are going to let drift away, even with if you even follow through with this permitting. We will still be in serious opposition. We will be going to court. We don't want to see this happen. It's bad for the community.
Barry, you've got about 30 seconds.
Okay. It's bad for the community. 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 How many seconds do I have now? Don't do this. Thank you.
Thank you, Barry. We do appreciate your comment.
I hope so.
Marjorie Steele, you are the next person on my list. You should be able to go ahead whenever you're ready.
Hi there, Jennifer. Can you hear me?
Yes, I can. Sorry, I clicked my unmute or my mute too fast. Yes, I can hear you loud and clear.
No worries at all. Marjorie Steele, I'm a resident of Mecosta County. I'm also the founder and executive director of the Economic Development Responsibility Alliance of Michigan, or EGLE of MI. We've sent in a longer, more detailed public comment. I do first, Jennifer, just want to take a minute to thank you and your staff for taking the time to, not only do your due diligence as is required here, but to do your best to field questions and to, really internalize the information that's being given to you. I see the due diligence there, and I just want you folks to know that we appreciate that. These are, never easy situations for anybody. So, kind of basically what we're asking you folks to do with this permit is to table it for a couple of reasons. Um, well, first of all, we're requesting that some changes be made in regards to how the prevention of significant deterioration, or PSD, is being measured as its threshold specifically. These had been separated from Ford and DTE's facility within the permits, which basically bumped DTE to be just being below the threshold for federal regulation. And if you're going to combine the permits, you might as well combine all of the data and hold it to, the highest standard possible. But much more importantly, the reason why we're asking you to table this is until the EPA's NMP risk management rule is in effect. So right now, N-methylpyrrolidone is a known harmful agent. It is it's not technically a PFAS, but it's what we would know as forever chemicals, as you and your staff are well aware. These were the storage tanks that were being discussed earlier. This is such a harmful material that the EPA is so concerned about that it is currently in the review process, as I'm sure you know, of implementing a risk management rule to regulate the usage of NMP, specifically in facilities like this. More specifically, what they're working on is the prohibition of certain occupational uses in manufacturing. So that would be, prohibiting its use in certain situations entirely, container size restrictions and labeling requirements, workplace chemical protection programs for certain conditions of use, and also prescriptive controls. I appreciate that you have looked at some modeling for NMP. However, it is not within the list of chemicals that is regulated for this. Those workplace chemical protection programs that would be essential for workers are not in place yet. It's simply not safe to approve these permits with a total of 14 storage tanks of N-methylpyrrolidone without these regulations in effect. So this is, again, y'all are very well aware that the EPA is taking NMP and regulation very seriously, especially right along the banks of the Kalamazoo River. particularly concerning that sounds like there isn't, secondary containment either for these. I think that it's very reasonable, and that there's a very clear need to table these entirely, and all future permits from other departments as well, from other divisions of EGLE, until these NMP risk management rules have gone into effect. Um, Furthermore, last but not least, an added level of scrutiny should be applied to all of these permits across the board, considering the bad faith relationship that the developer Meta has already established, with over 18 environmental violations going to the Resources Division alone, to date for this project. That should send up some red flags and have everybody just pay closer attention, and also to, when in doubt, hold them to a higher level of standards, kind of per our conversation about the PSD thresholds. That's all I've got. Thanks so much.
Yeah, thank you so much for your comment, Marjorie. Brandy Sweet, you are next.
Hello, can I be heard?
Yep, there you go. Yep, I hear you loud and clear.
Okay, thank you. I would just like to start off with the technical fact sheet for Blue Oval battery plant states that the HRSGs will release exhaust gases that contain nitrogen oxides, carbon monoxide, particulates, toxic air contaminants, hazardous air pollutants, and volatile organic compounds. The cooling towers will release particulate matter and warm, moist air into the atmosphere. Marshall has a prevalence of sensitive populations within the area. This is a farming community. Their livelihoods rely on clean air, soil, and water. Most seem to forget that's what everyone needs first and foremost, but this community is predominantly agricultural. The land is known for its fertile soil, and permitting this, especially considering the way it's been forced on residents, is an environmental justice violation. It's well documented that air pollution can harm plants and trees, reducing crop yields, affecting forest growth, and making them more vulnerable to diseases and pests. Some air toxins being released here can cause birth defects or other developmental problems. These toxic air pollutants can also cause a range of other health issues, including neurological damage, cardiovascular problems, and immune system dysfunction, and some are known carcinogens. All these developments and permits granted around Michigan and further, all monitored separately and never thinking of the cumulative emissions and impact is outrageous. Crazy to witness the state of Michigan still in 2025 turning another greenfield site into a brownfield Superfund site. Nothing but toxic cancer causing jobs. The colonization and destruction just continue. Your proposed project summary states that on the technical fact sheet, individuals can find how the project will affect air quality and public health. Yet I don't see anywhere determining the breakdown of the inevitable cancer increase to the area, or any reference to the emissions that are known to accumulate in living organisms over time, causing bioaccumulation. If you are going to keep permitting human health and environmental destruction, the least EGLE and the state of Michigan could start doing is start being more transparent and laying out the actual known effects of these toxic emissions to surrounding humans, wildlife, plants, and waterways. I'd like to say that it's really weird that the nitrogen oxide emissions state for the DTE's potential emission summary states during the transition period 96.3 tons of nitrogen oxides per year will be released, while during normal operations 94 tons per year will be released, while the threshold states not to exceed 100 tons per year. But when you combine Ford and DTEs, it goes up to 250 tons per year for a threshold. Why would it increase that 100 tons per year is safe, but then when you combine the two, 250 tons per year is safe? It doesn't make sense. Things like that contribute to smog, acid rain, and nitrogen deposition, harming ecosystems. And the way that he talked about the air monitoring station, saying that, it's really like that was gaslighting, downplaying that it's really not necessary to have prior air monitoring, and it's really not necessary to have after air monitoring due to our pretend make-believe monitoring system that worked years prior a few times when there were boots on the ground, and we no longer do that. And to throw money in people's face when the MEDC in the state of Michigan is using taxpayer money to supply and fund this. Yes, you can't think about that, but you guys should start advocating in Lansing for the environment and for the people and standing up and saying that this is not right. We need more funding for air monitors before we need to permit more hazardous developments. So that's really all I have to say tonight. I will write in more. Thank you very much.
No, thank you for your comment, Brandy. The next person that I have is Julian Bryant.
Hi there, can you hear me?
Yep, sure can.
My name is Julianne Bryant. I'm a resident of Marshall Township. The neighborhood that I live on is on the other side of the river. There's approximately 150 homes in 2 neighborhoods, which we all have wells. As it was previously spoke about, the property that has been ruined on the other side of the river was the most fertile, best farmland. And we had someone that came and explained to us that this land was so good for farming because it didn't have any clay in it. So anything that's going to be in the air is going to end up in the ground. And as you all know, this is also along 3 miles of the Kalamazoo River. So what is going to happen to our water, aside from the air, what is going to happen to our water? What is going to happen to the Kalamazoo River, which also flows into Lake Michigan, okay? It seems like there is a lot of things that you guys don't know. I've heard that we're assuming about things, and when I never assume about anything, and especially about my health and the health of my family and the health of the other residents in this town. You guys want to guess what's going on with our air? And then the gentleman said, well, he was worried about how much it would cost you guys to put in some stations. And I want to know what is this going to cost our residents? We hear that this is something major, but then that it's only going to be tested at every 1.5 years, and that you are here to protect the community. But are you really? There's so many. I have so many questions here from just your little thing here. Any amount of pollutants is not acceptable, like Barry said. Who's going to inspect and regulate this project, since they're, Kalamazoo is like the closest air tower. I'm sorry, I don't have the technical words here. And then why should the residents have to worry about any pollution? One, why are you trying to combine foreign and DTE permits into one, yet measuring the plant's emissions separately? I think that's already been gone over. These facilities should be evaluated as one, just as a permit is evaluating them as one. 2, in regards to the NMP, dangerous chemical, why would you allow 14 storage tanks outside of this NMP to be used with no way to regulate it? And also wanted to mention that NMA is considered by the EPA as a serious threat. And again, this plant is on top of 2 neighborhoods and a few miles from the center of our town. No permits should be issued for a facility using NMP until the EPA's new regulations go into effect. That's part of you guys protecting us. Lastly, the Marshall Megasite has gathered 18 violations from EGLE to date, and many corrective actions issued are still not completed. These violations need to be completely resolved before any new permits are reviewed. They should be reviewed with much scrutiny given the developers' bad faith behavior. Just one last thing, I drove that route last week and took videos, and we're not just talking about a little dust here. We're talking about The houses that are straight across from this are being just nailed with dust clouds. With my car, I noticed it definitely entered and exit a giant dust cloud. And I don't see this getting any better, only worse. So thank you for listening to us. We hope that you guys can make the right decisions, because we are all people, and some of us, myself in particular, I have health issues that I'm very worried about living between a quarter to a mile, half a mile away from this plant. In my house, am I gonna have to like keep all my windows shut and hide in my house? It's just unconscionable. But thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you, Julian, for your comment. We do appreciate that. I don't have any other hands raised, so if anyone else would like to make a comment, just a reminder, you can use that raise hand icon at the bottom of your screen. It looks like we don't have anyone calling in anymore. Just want to double check that. Okay, Richard. Richard Lindsay, if you would like to make a comment, you can go ahead whenever you're ready.
Hello, this is Richard Lindsay. I'm the attorney for MEDA, which has been the developer in this project. Also have been involved with this project for a couple of years as far as gathering options and kind of preliminary work for this project. This project really started with the zoning being changed back in 1968, and this property has been anticipated for industrial development from 1968 onward. And the project has been a once in a generation opportunity for the Marshall community, for the Calhoun County community. I would dispute many of the things that were said, and I would note that there were 2 Marshall residents that spoke, and then other people that were not from Marshall. And take that into consideration. And I would also say that the soil in this area was very sandy and was not good farming soil. So this has been a common misconception that's been repeated over and over again, but it's just absolutely wrong. It had such limited organic material that it was able to be used for structural fill in the project as the project went forward. And I was also involved in the issues with EGLE relative to the water. There were 2 violations that I was aware of. There were some other technical violations, like the plans weren't to the specifications of EGLE. Those were resolved. The fine was paid. There's an administrative consent order in place. MEDA has followed meticulously every environmental law. The violations that were occurred were because of 2 extraordinary rain events that happened last summer. And so I would dispute that. And I would, I guess, end by saying, we want this project. We want this to go forward. Mr. Adams ran for mayor and was defeated by 2-to-1 margin. The other 2 people that ran at the same time to try to stop this project from a city perspective also lost by similar margins. There's been overwhelming support for this project. There's been multiple hearings, and it is a relatively small group of people that remain in opposition. And the people that want to see this move forward want to see jobs. They want to see economic development for Marshall, want to see economic development for the region. And so thank you for the work that you're doing. I feel very confident that you're following the rules that are in place, and that you'll make an appropriate decision regarding this. Thank you.
Thank you for your comment, Richard. Anyone else would like to make a comment? We do have some time, so I'll just give everybody a minute here to see if I see any other hands raised. And if I don't, we will go ahead and close out the hearing. Okay, and I'm not seeing any other hands. Are you okay if I close the hearing out?
Yes, you can go ahead.
Okay, I just need to read a quick closing statement and then we'll go over a few other things to close out the meeting. So thank you so much for taking your time to participate in this meeting tonight. We do really appreciate your interest in protecting Michigan's air quality. As indicated at the beginning of the hearing, the public comment period will close at midnight on July 28th, 2025. All interested parties, anyone who provided comments during the public comment period, and anyone who attended this public hearing will be notified of the final decision on this proposed permit. So the hearing is now closed. Thank you again. Just a couple other things, if folks are interested, we talked a lot about how you can submit an official comment. So tonight was one way that you can do that. You heard some of the folks say that they had already submitted comments. We have gotten some comments through our My Enviro portal system. That's just an online system that will allow you to plug your comments in online. You can also upload attachments, things like that. You can also send those in just via US Post to our office here in Lansing. You can send your comment in via email to our email box. That's EGLE-AQD-PTI public comments at michigan.gov. You can also just call in a comment. I know some folks like to type out what they want to say, and then they'll just call us and read it out. It doesn't matter how you submit your comment. They all weigh the same. We aren't particular about how we get them. We kind of consider them all on their own merit. So just wanted to go over that. I know Caitlin has been doing a phenomenal job, and I see her putting some other information in the chat. So she always does a great job of sharing this information. And I know folks heard people commenting on the proposed project summary, that technical fact sheet that does provide some, high level and then a little bit deeper dive into that technical review of the permit applications and our evaluation that Tom talked about tonight. So those are also available for you. And here I'm just going to leave this on the screen for a minute in case anybody wants to jot it down really quickly. But like I mentioned, we will be sending out a copy of these slides. We will also send out a link to the recording, so you will have this information. But feel free to reach out, even if you just reach out to Tom. And he's not the right person. He's more than happy to get you to the person who can help answer your questions. And I know we had some questions that we need to get back to folks on. So we will definitely follow up on doing that. We'll try to get that done this week. If we, for some reason, can't, we will try to get that to you early next week. I just don't know who we'll have to coordinate with to make sure that we're getting all the appropriate answers that folks will need for that. And with that, I just want to thank everyone again for joining us tonight. I know this is a hot but nice day. It's summer. I'm sure there's other things that you might rather be doing than spending time with us talking about this, but we do really appreciate the time and effort and energy that you have spent speaking with us tonight, sharing your comments and your concerns and your questions. So, Caitlin, if you want, you can go ahead and close out the meeting. And again, thanks everybody and have a great night.